So the piece I decided to do was Movement 1 of Mozart's Piano Sonata Number 8 in A minor. The exposition begins with the eighth theme in measures 1 through 9, and it's characterized by heavy left-hand chords and dotted rhythms in the right hand. And it is, of course, in A minor. And so here we begin the transition in which we modulate to C major, which is the relative major of A minor, but we use D major and C minor to get to C major for the B theme. And towards the end of the transition, we switch between G major and C minor chords. And then we end on a G chord, so we can go into C major. And so here in measure 22 to measure 45, we have the B theme. It is now in C major, and this is characterized by mainly chords in the left hand and suspensions, and then running 16th notes mainly in the right hand. So that measure you just heard was measure 30. It is the golden section of the exposition. It has a descending passage that still has some upward movement as we go up by step for the sections of 2 notes. And then on beat 2, 2 notes sound at the same time instead of just being more suspensions or just 1 note on that beat. And it's the first bar in this section to really have something different like that. So for measures 45 to 49, we have the closing theme, which combines the dotted rhythms of the A theme and the 16th notes of the B theme in the left hand. And it is also in C major. And so the development begins in measure 50, and it goes into measure 79. It begins with the A theme in C major rather than in A minor, and then it continues with passages of eighth notes. Then it starts to incorporate 16th note passages of descending notes from the B theme. There's lots of chromatic alterations and also sequences of the dotted 8/16th rhythms from the A theme. Measure that you just heard, measure 68, was the golden section of the development. It is in this 4-bar repeating phrase, and it's the highest peak. It goes from A to C sharp to D back down to A in above the staff in the right hand, which is very similar to the measure beforehand. What's interesting about this measure is this sort of marks the downhill slope. For this pattern, so you see in the next bar, it only reaches a B flat above the staff in the right hand. And this continues for a little bit until we reach the rising 16th notes from the B theme that close out the development. What's also interesting about this bar is that it has repeated instances of C sharp, which indicate D major, which we visited back in the transition of the exposition. Here in measure 80, we have have the recap, and it begins with the A theme for measure 80 to 88 in A minor, the home key once again. Here from measure 88 to 103, we have the transition, which does not modulate, so it mainly stays in A minor, and it is also slightly longer than the one we saw in the exposition by a few bars. So for measures 103 to 129, we have the B theme once again, but this time it is now in the home key of A minor. And from here in measure 129 to the end, we have the closing theme once again, this time in A minor rather than C major. So now we're going to take a look at the golden section of the entire piece using measure numbers. So that will be measure 82. So that was that measure right there. It's exactly the same as it was in the exposition in A minor because it's from the A theme, but it does indicate the return to the original theme that he started the whole piece with. And then we're going to look at the golden section of the entire piece using the time clock in the video, which was around 5 minutes and was at bars 118 to 119, which are these two here. And so these two bars make sort of a U shape as bar 118 descends down and then 119 brings us right back up. This is part of the B theme, which is in A minor this time, and we have lots of use of chromatic alterations here with the G sharp and then the B flats. G sharp, of course, is from A major, which makes sense. And then what's really interesting about this piece is that it was composed in the summer of 1778, which was actually around the time that Mozart's mother passed away. So she became ill while she was on tour with Mozart and his father, and then she passed away in Paris in 1778. And Mozart's father actually blamed Mozart for his mother's death. And so this sonata seems like the physicalization of Mozart's emotions over his mother's death. And this makes sense because this is actually one of his only piano sonatas in minor. The only other one is the sonata number 14 in C minor. We have the heavy bass chords paired with the dotted right hand rhythm, which gives it a sort of like funeral march sound, which is also created by the minor key. We also have lots of chromaticism throughout the piece, as seen from some of the bars on screen here, and it creates this uneasiness, which also happens to start the piece because we actually start with a raised grace note right there, a D sharp, which doesn't belong in the key of A minor or A major or C major. And then he also employs lots of brief cadences, so the piece doesn't really settle. And actually in measure 14, in the actual score of the piece, it says calando, which happens a couple more times throughout. And that word actually means dying out. So I thought that was really interesting.